met for the first time the Universal House of Justice as it sat on the stage in the first morning. And the cable was read that had been sent to the Baha'i world. Occasioned worldwide celebrations, most great jubilee, commemorating centenary ascension Baha'u'llah's throne, his sovereignty, with hearts overflowing gratitude, his unfailing protection, overflowing bounties, joyously announced friends, east, west, election, supreme legislative body, ordained by him in his most holy book, promised by him receive his infallible guidance. Stop. Members first, historic House Justice, duly elected by delegates, comprising members 56 National Assemblies are Charles Walcott, Ali Nakjavani, Bora Catalan, Ian Semple, Lutmiller Harkham, David Hoffman, Hugh Chance, Amos Gibson, Ushman Fatihazan. To jubilation entire Baha'i world, victorious completion of beloved Guardian's unique crusade. You know, the Baha'is worked hard. Without a guardian and the call of the hands, they wanted to achieve and fulfill that 10-year crusade. Oh, and I know how sacrifices were made, east and west, to achieve those goals. To jubilation entire Baha'i world, victorious completion, beloved Guardian's unique crusade. Now added humble gratitude, profound thanksgiving, followers Baha'u'llah, for erection, Universal House of Justice, august body to whom all believers must turn, whose destiny is to guide unfoldment, his embryonic world order through administrative institutions, prescribed by Baha'u'llah, elaborated by Abdul Baha, laboriously erected by Shoghi Effendi, and ensure early dawn of the golden age of the faith, when the word of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. I think that last quotation comes from the book of Revelation. I remember very well at the time of the World Congress, all the hands of the cause assembled on the first floor of the National Hazrat al-Quds, 27 Rutland Gate, London. And the Universal House of Justice came, and they went up onto the second floor of that building, each having consultations separately. And then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon of the 5th of May, a day I'll never forget, it was my birthday, a birthday present. The House of Justice members came down and met with the whole body of the hands of the cause for the first time. And it was then started developments for the starting of the changing over from the hands of the cause to the House of Justice. For instance, the planning of all the properties, all the shrines, all the international funds were all in the hands of the hands. They had been taken over from the Guardian through that unique document, the Will and Testament, and his statement, Chief Stewards. I said I would explain that. You know, that was a significant statement. It made it very clear to the Baha'is of the world who was in charge for those 6 years as it happened. Because there could have been members who could have said, well, the Guardian appointed the International Baha'i Council. They should take over. They should administrate the Baha'i world. There could have been Baha'is, and particularly from Iran, who had a beautiful letter from Abdul Baha explaining how the Universal House of Justice would be elected. And they could have said, well, the National Assemblies should come together and now elect the House of Justice. But providentially, the Guardian's statement, Chief Stewards, made it clear that the hands of the cause, delegated in the Will and Testament, clearly defined for the protection of the cause, should take over. And praise be to God, there was no challenge except the one that we know of the second Guardian making a claim. And that claim was only like throwing a stone in a pool, and the ripple went out in the pool and then disappeared. Went into oblivion, finished. The mighty covenant remained firm and strong, and the national spiritual assemblies of the world gave allegiance to the hands of the cause, which in turn the government of Israel accepted. The hands then as the supreme body, and the transfers of all the properties, funds and everything were affected into the hands of the hands. And the hands tried desperately to maintain as much of those international funds as possible, to be able to hand them to that supreme institution of Baha'u'llah, so that when they came into being, they would have financial resources. And the hands struggled really to maintain those funds. Although there were many, many calls during that period. You will recall that it was in Rizwan 1964 that the Universal House of Justice released their 9-year plan. One of the goals of that 9-year plan was their own goal. The goal of the House of Justice to establish and take into the future the functions of the Will and Testament of protection and propagation. And as a result, they called all the hands of the cause to the World Centre in 1964 to consider this question of how we'll take this function of the Will and Testament into the future as a part of the protection and the propagation of the faith. And that meeting went for about 10 days, but no results came out from the House of Justice. I understand they wanted to learn more of what was in the mighty revelation of Baha'u'llah, to be sure that they didn't, because they could deal with all matters that are not recorded in the Will and Testament, in the writings of Baha'u'llah. So it wasn't until the first re-election, 1968, 63, the 5 years to 68. And the hands were called upon to be prepared, stay on after the election is over. And further discussion took place then of what's going to take place to carry these functions into the future. And as a result of which, the hands, after some days of consultation with the members of the House of Justice, believe me, they were experiences in consultation. The high respect that was given in all the consultation, even for those that completely did not agree with suggestions that were made. The courtesy was an experience in itself, which all the assemblies in which the institutions must establish with their own consultation. The courtesy and the respect, even if you don't agree, you say it in such respect that you're not directly opposing another person. we learn much about consultation, or at least, shall I say, I did anyway. I had a lot of lessons given to me. And it was then that the House of Justice sent us back a letter as we were seated together, all the hands, announcing they were appointing 11 boards of councillors. Then they increased later, in a couple of years, to 13 boards because of the increases of the numbers of believers in the Indian subcontinent and an Asian area in particular. At the same time, they were increasing and calling upon more national spiritual assemblies to come into being. It was then in 1973 that the House of Justice announced another institution of we're coming into being, foreshadowed by the Guardian, the International Teaching Centre, of which they appointed members with the rank of councillors, which in 1968 they had announced these councillors to be the responsible ones to take into the future the functions of the will and testament of protection and propagation. Well, you see, you young fellas, you know it's handy to have a wife. I'm just reminded, that's very true. International Teaching Centre was appointed first with 7 members to that council, but Hands of the Cause were also considered members of it. Later in 1981, they increased that to 7, to 9 members of that International Teaching Centre. Also in 73, some of you will remember, and possibly there's some of the members here, the House of Justice, instead of increasing more and more auxiliary board members, they introduced assistants to the auxiliary boards to function in specific areas, to operate and assist in both protection and propagation of the faith. So we're seeing this administrative order growing and developing. And I'd just like, my wife knows what I do here, so I'm calling her up to help me work out a passage here. Something that I use in some places, particularly in the Pacific Islands and some of the villages of places, because the Bahá'ís are not aware and not clear on these things. And we see, oh yes, I have here, you've seen these Japanese ballpoint pens. They're very useful for school teachers. And Bahá'ís also, you can stretch them. Here, I don't think I have to do any explaining here. Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Baha, Guardian, and the Universal House of Justice. You know all about these. You also know that it was Baha'u'llah that appointed the first 4 hands of the cause. It was Abdu'l-Baha that named 4 hands of the cause. It was the Guardian that named the rest. A total number with those of posthumously 50, and shall we say minus 1 who defected. We see here, this must be the local spiritual assembly of Kungälv. You have one here in this city? No, must be Gothenburg, is it? Gothenburg? Local spiritual assembly right here. And here in Sweden you have unit conventions, or is it local assembly elections for delegates? Unit conventions. Okay, well, the unit convention, you elect your local assembly, you elect your delegate at the unit convention and send your delegate to the national convention. And then here, your national delegate elects the National Spiritual Assembly. This one must be Sweden, right here. And of course, next door is Norway and Finland. Okay. Then next year, the whole 149 National Spiritual Assemblies, each with their 9 members, will cast 9 votes for the Universal House of Justice. So we're seeing this God-given world order of Baha'u'llah, the living organism, as is said in this program. It's growing and developing before our eyes. We're seeing it. We're living in the time since 51, these coming into being and growing and developing. On the other hand, we saw in this one, as I said, in 73, International Teaching Centre, brought into being to take the load off the men of the House of Justice. They had all the councillors, all the auxiliary board members' reports, all the national assemblies at the time, I think it was 84, pouring in their reports to the World Centre. And the members of the House of Justice were becoming very virtually in correspondence and communications. And so this International Teaching Centre came into being, and from then on, all these continental boards of councillors, communications went, and still do, go to the International Teaching Centre. And then the 11 boards, the 13 boards were reduced in 1981 down to the 5 continental boards. Exactly the same 5 continents as had been given by the Guardian to the hands of the cause of the 5 continents. And then the board members come to the 5 continents of Africa, Asia, Australia, Europe, and America. And then we've seen in that time, in this period of the councillors now appointing their auxiliary board members instead of the hands. And now the board members appointing their assistants with the approval of their councillor. So we're seeing growth of the faith developing. We're also seeing here the collaboration taking place between the councillors and the National Spiritual Assemblies, particularly in regard to the establishment of this 6-year plan, where the consultation of the 2 brought into being that 6-year plan. And don't forget, by the way, that Baha'u'llah said his revelation was for all the worlds of God. So that 6-year plan, when you arrive in the next world, they might just be starting another one there in the next world. So be ready for it. We're seeing also the councillors having a voice in the convention but no vote. We're seeing hands able to do the same thing. We're seeing hands meeting with National Spiritual Assembly also. We're seeing the councillors meeting even with local spiritual assemblies. We're also seeing the board members meeting with local spiritual assemblies and assisting in propagation and teaching. And believe me, I've already found out there are lots of local assemblies around the world that are waking up to the fact, hey, let's invite the auxiliary board members and get their assistance to help us with our projects. Help us with our own local plans to take the faith to this village, that village, so on. They're waking up to this collaboration. It's working both ways. So the board members are going and meeting and encouraging them. Even they have been deputized, board members deputized to meet with national spiritual assemblies. Where there's no councillors, they deputize one to meet, maybe for specific reasons, for the promotion of the faith. So we're seeing this global world order of Baha'u'llah emerging. We're seeing election, this side of the cause virtually being elected, the elected bodies, with the exception that they do appoint national committees, local committees. On this side, it's all appointed. The House of Justice appoints the councillors. It appoints the membership of the teaching centre. The councillors appoint their auxiliary board members. Their auxiliary board members appoint their assistants with the approval of the councillors. But we see also some very interesting things here in this world order. Here we see the national and local assemblies in particular having responsibility and authority. They've been given authority. There's not dual authority of the Baha'i world. They're given authority to enforce the laws of the faith. And as I once saw and experienced in a meeting, when the Baha'is had been talking about the high standards of the faith, and a minister of religion sitting in that audience turned and with sarcasm, "Fool that hurt the Baha'is. Can't you see your Baha'i walking down the street drunken?" Oh, that really hurt. I can tell you that Baha'i lost his voting rights very quickly. Authority is given to the institutions to maintain obedience to this laws. If the Baha'is don't live up to the laws of Baha'u'llah, who else is going to change this world? This world needs to be changed. This world's dying for love, dying for high standards, to be honest and kind and truthful to one another. We're living in an age of change. As the Guardian called it, an age of transition in one of his letters. And we're seeing this transition operating because of these institutions. They have responsibility for the plans, responsibility and authority. But on this side of the course, they have responsibility, but not the same authority. They have responsibility for protection and propagation. And as a result of protection, the House of Justice is still continuing that same function in relationship to covenant breakers. You may remember there are still two hands of the cause in the World Centre, Mr. Farutan and Ruhil Karnoum. But the House of Justice called on two other members, myself and Mr. Ali Nakjabani, Ali Muhammad Baga, to also be members in this matter. And we're liable for call to Haifa immediately for any of that matter, because it is in the will and testament, and the House of Justice is keeping those functions in that will and testament, that covenant, they're keeping as closely as they can within its range. And so there's things not on here now. You've learned that the Baha'i international community now has its office. It has its office in Jerusalem and having relationship with the government of Israel. and which recently established that new agreement. A relationship started by the Guardian with the first International Baha'i Council, invested with to forge a link with authorities of the newly emerged state. We're still forging links with the state, that state of Israel. And we're seeing the growth of the faith all over the world. We're also seeing guidance coming from the World Centre for the Social and Economic Developments taking place in many countries. So this what does it say here? The living organism. It's very, very much alive, I can tell you that. And we heard from Mr. Paul Hermer, I don't know how you say that, the O's got a couple of dots over the top. What does that mean? Is it still an O? We heard from him as what is happening with the Baha'i international community in New York. And now we also have its branch in Geneva. And we already know what's taking place with the developments going on to all the heads of state and to the members of all the governments, and, well, widely spread. We see this living organism taking place. And the Hands of the Cause are still members of this International Teaching Centre. We still participate in it when opportunity presents itself. And all hands report direct to the Universal House of Justice. So that, in effect, is all I can tell you of the world order of Baha'u'llah. It's still growing and developing, and you people are assisting by building and establishing the local God-given communities. We don't have individuals as such in authority in the Baha'i faith. We don't have priests and bishops and the like to guide the people in their church activities. We have local spiritual assemblies, institutions that themselves must be alive and take the lead in guiding their community in their respective area. They must take the responsibility and the initiative to see that their faith is expanding in their area, that it's going through and taking every opportunity to announce and promote the local spiritual assemblies, guided by their national spiritual assembly. The members, as the guy said before, the generals responsible for each respective country to guide the believers in the direction and the promotion of the greatest changes the world has ever known, as it emerges from a materialistic civilization to a divine civilization ordained by God. And we have the bounty. I think I told you once before, did I? I forget now. I'm having my trouble, the same as our dear Hand of the Cause in Australia said one day to me. She says, you know, Cole, there's one thing that improves with age. I couldn't think of anything that improves with age except maybe wine, but that wasn't what Mother was thinking about, Mother Dunn. I said, what is it, Mother? She says, my forgettery. It improves with age. So we're seeing the development and growth of the faith around the world. And we're excited by the news of the new development, the exciting development to me, to see the land of Israel, its government recognizing the supreme institution ordained by God. And I want to tell you a secret. When my wife and I sat with Shoghi Effendi, he said the time will come when suddenly the people of Israel will realize their Messiah is in their midst. And already the government has done so to the God-given institutions of our faith. They've given recognition. And we're seeing the expansion and recognition of the faith all over the world. The Bahá'ís in Australia have been quite rejoiced to see in our federal government twice the discussion